That's a long time. We've covered a lot of ground, and we're going to keep doing it kind of at an easy pace, so we can really take advantage of the fun of the story, because we're getting into lots of fun now. Um, we last time we looked at two people. So this is in the book of First Samuel. Oh, how about if I turn it? There I go. Yeah, so we last time we looked at the figure of Samuel. We saw his origin story. So Samuel is presented as a prophet or a seer, and also as a judge. And it was a story of basically little boy make good, and he's very successful, and he organizes the defense of the people against their enemies, that kind of stuff that the judges used to do. But then he got old, and there he is. He goes from like being really young to being really old. So they said, so the people come to him. They say, "You're old, and your sons don't follow your example." And as we saw, that's one of the basic problems of leadership, is that it's difficult to inherit, because you can't inherit skills necessarily. So they say, "Appoint a king over us like all the nations who rule us." Okay, so this is this point in the story where kingship emerges again as a form of leadership. And we saw that there was an example of kingship much earlier in the book of Judges that didn't work out so well. And we saw it in the Torah and the commandments. He says you can have a king if you want, but he can't have any power. So consider that paradox. When the people ask for a king, God gets a bit upset, and so does Samuel, but they get one anyway. And so he has this big hullabaloo, this ceremony, where he, says, God has served you, has led you as a king all this time, and now you want a human king. Uh, you know, why settle for the greater good, get the lesser good, right? And so he says, we're going to pick one by lot, which is the conventional way that you let God decide, is you do it by lot, and or probably by some form of divination. I think we'll see actually a divination device. They have like divination technology. It's called the ephod, which is this little sort of chess piece that priests wear, and it has two little items in it called the Urim and the Tumim. And we're not sure what they looked like, but it's sort of like a roll of the dice or roll of the bones and see where they fall. And usually it involves asking yes or no questions or simple questions. Like, not, what will the dark market be next week, but like, should we attack today? Should we go indoors today? Is it be too hot? Those kind of questions. So presumably the questions here is, is the king coming from this tribe? Is the king coming from that tribe? And so they make their way down until there's almost no one left. They know it's coming from the tribe of Benjamin, and it's going to be one of the sons of Kish, a guy in that tribe. Now the reader, know who it's going to be, because there was a story before this where Saul showed up, Better Call Saul, and he was called, right? But it was in secret. Now it's public. So Saul is nowhere to be found, and so they have to do divination to find out where he is. And with this sort of tongue-cheek answer, Yahweh says, "Oh, he's hiding among baggage." So immediately, and actually even before we got to this point, Saul's an interesting character because he has these quirks. And part of the challenge, this is what I'm going to have us think about tonight as we go through the stories. What is his personality? What kind of character is this? He's not really two-dimensional. I mean, he's more like three-dimensional. And since he fails in the end, we're going to figure out was a character flaw. Anyway, so they find him hiding among the baggage. And again, the prophet Samuel, with some tongue in cheek, says, "There is no one like him among all people." Yeah, he's hiding with bags. "Long live the king," they shout. Okay, so that's where we end up. And then he talks about kingdoms, and then we're told that some warriors, their hearts were touched by God, and they decided to sort of join as his posse. But others, who were called worthless people, of course they'd be worthless if they didn't like Saul, they despise him. Okay, so he begins his reign with not everyone voted for him, right? There's dispute as to whether he really is up to snuff. And so guess what the story for today will be? He gets tested to see whether his mettle is up to test. Okay, so this is the first one. A month later, enemy besieges one of their cities. Okay, and the people who are being besieged, they immediately kowtow to their besiegers, saying, "Don't destroy us. Just take a treaty. We'll serve you, be your slaves, and all this." And good old Nahash, who's the king there, who's attacking them, he says, "Oh well, yeah, I'll let you do that so long as each of you gouges your right eye out, as a gesture of shame, to show how great I am and how low you are." Note, I love this guy. So me. Okay, so obviously it's a raw deal. Still, they give 7 days to try to find someone to save us from you. And if we can't find anyone, they'll do whatever you want. It's actually kind of funny. Okay, so messengers are sent. Some come to Saul's hometown of Gibeah, and everyone's weeping because this is a terrible thing happening. When Saul shows up with his oxen coming in from the field, he asks, "Why are they weeping?" And then they tell him what's going down at Jabesh Gilead. And we're told that he heard this, the Spirit of God rushed upon him, and he became very angry. Okay, so this is something that often happens with leader characters, is the Spirit falls upon them, and it sort of invigorates them to act in a certain way. So this is, not be tolerated. Okay, he's so angry that he kills all of his oxen. And then he chops them up in pieces, sends the piece to all the territories. Now, this reminds of that terrible story back in Judges, where the traveler was assaulted in this town, and to save his skin, he booted out his wife, and she was hopefully dead by then. But then he decided to chop her up into small parts and send her around So it's the same tactic, except here he's not saying, "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to do this to your ex, and if you don't." So this is his mobilization tactics. Okay, so first personality thing. We think about it. So he knows he needs mobilized people to defend this town, and he knows that everyone wants to follow him. So he basically threatens them, right? "You don't do this, I'll do this to you." Okay, it works though. We're told the threat of Yahweh came upon all the people, and they came forth as one. Okay, so it was an effective scare tactic. They all go together to join forces. And told that he reviews the troops, 300,000 and 70,000 more. Never trust numbers in any ancient literature, probably not in modern literature either, but in ancient literature, this is way too much. There wouldn't, the whole territory of Eastern Eurasia would not be the capacity to house that many people at an agrarian nationality. Divide by 10 or maybe by 100, and we get close to the scale of. But anyway, the point is that everyone's ready. Okay, so then sends the messengers back saying, "Tell them that tomorrow when the sun goes hot, so by noon, they will be saved." So they're looking for us to save us. Okay, so you might hope that it would respond positively to that, but when they hear it, they to Brad King, they say, "Well, tomorrow we'll surrender to you and do whatever you want." Or are they just, is that stalling tactics maybe, or are they really not convinced? The point is that the narrative builds tension, right? Will he do it? Will they get their eyes gouged? That's the question. Well, Saul leads the troops out the next day, and he has a battle with much CGI with the enemies, and told they were totally victorious over the guys. The survivors were so scattered that no two of them were left together. That means they totally broke the ranks. Okay, so Saul is totally successful here. After the victory, so see, now he knows how to mobilize people and to lead them in battle. So far, so good. The people that say, who questioned whether Saul could rule over us? Remember the people, the worthless fellows? Hand them over and we'll put them to death. In other words, whoever was questioning this surely should be punished. It actually sounds a lot like what went down in the book of Judges when they said, "Who was on our side when we had victory? Let's kill them all." But how does Saul respond? He says, "No one will be to death this day, for today Yahweh has rescued Israel," or saved Israel. Same verb in Hebrew. Okay, so we've seen him do two things. Seen him act pretty quickly in a crisis, and like Julius Caesar, he likes to show clemency to those who doubt him. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? What does this tell us about him as a potential ruler?
Well, with Caesar, was very manipulative.
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, if you show mercy, why?
But that's the question. It kind of comes out of nowhere. Okay, he says no, no. Now, when we look back to the first time there was a king in the book of Judges, it was, if you don't support me, I'll destroy you all. So you should support me. And there was mercy, and just the fact he that way, this guy named Abimelech, invited challenge, and there was a challenger that overthrew him, and that guy was overthrown too. Seems to be a bit different here, right? He's saying there's no need to fight over me, right? What else?
Although he like handed it over to Yahweh,
Yeah.
instead of like, taking the glory for himself, he says, "I rescued Israel."
Yes, that's probably a pretty important piece there. Who's he giving credit for this? Right? So that might be a good sign. Okay, let's see how it goes from here. Okay, so Samuel shows up, and they say, let's go up to Gilgal. That's where you go as a group to do things. Let's bring the king up there. So apparently it's like, that's his probation. His probationary period, he was successful. Now let's make him, tenured. Right? So they'll go to Gilgal, and they made him king again. And there was much rejoicing, like in Monty Python. Okay, now we get a kind of bow out by Samuel the prophet. So he is kind of driving the storyline for the first 2 chapters. Now he's going to be stepping back, and we'll just summarize what he says here. He kind of forces them to reflect on his leadership, right? Because his premise was, you don't need a king, right? You have God working for me. That's all you need. But he says, look, I, Samuel, have granted everything you asked of this guy. I've given you a king. The king has led you. I'm old. And it's here I stand. Stands me in the presence of Yahweh, and Yahweh is anointed. Have I ever bamboozled anyone? Have I ever taken anything? Have I ever oppressed anyone when I was leader? And of course, they'll say, no, you didn't. So he's sort of defending his own record, except it's not to be elected, it's so he can then bow out. So in other words, you didn't ask for a king because I was bad, what he's saying. Right? So he says, okay, well, then you found them okay. And then says, but then you asked for this other king, right? This guy who's going to be a king. And he says, take your stand that I may judge you. So I'm going to judge you now. He says, of course, he's a judge. That's what judges do. But usually judges adjudicate disputes, right? So the dispute here is between him and people and God, right? Because he's going to try to guilt trip him, saying that you should have asked for this. Right? And so it goes through this sort of survey of history. Remember, God appointed Moses and Aaron, and they helped you. But you forgot about them, and then these evil leaders, our enemy, captured us. You cry out saying, we won't worship other gods. And so God sent you judges. Notice, it says, me. He actually includes himself in that list. So we gave you everything you needed, yet when you saw this most recent evil king, you said, no, we need a king, even though Yahweh your God is your king. Okay, so he's reminding them of this. So he says, okay, so I'm out of the picture. You now have your king. And then he reminds what they should do, right? Fear, serve Yahweh. Don't create dual loyalties here. If you don't listen, both you and your king will suffer. Right? So notice that there's no, even though in the original "Why you want a king" passage was, well, when they ask for a king, the king will be terrible to them, and I won't them as God. It's a bit different. Here, Samuel saying, both you and the king have to behave, otherwise both of you are going to suffer. That's a different message, which we know is true. he says, I'm going to do a marvel now. Yes, you have to do a marvel, a miracle to sort of validate your position. Incidentally, in Judaism later on, like in the 2nd century AD, so the rabbis would reject this principle, the principle that a divine manifestation somehow makes you right. This is what Samuel is saying. You know, if you make it rain, then you'll know that I'm right. Right? Because God is essentially giving him a thumbs. He's giving him a like. Right. But the rabbis later on would say um, miracles don't count for anything, actually. And I'll tell a story that's and very indicative of how the religion of the Bible is not the same thing as Judaism. It's related to it, obviously. So the story is that various rabbis, teachers, scholars, they were arguing over how best to interpret a commandment. One rabbi said, well, I think this is the way we should interpret it. And I call upon God to verify my position. And so God, does some miracle. He makes a tree jump and walk over to another place. And the other rabbis say that doesn't count. Because the Torah is not in heaven. The Torah is here for us to interpret. And God said it, and he has to step out of it. And in the end, there's, I think it's sort of meanwhile in heaven, God is hanging out watching this debate about who's right and who's wrong. I think it's like maybe it's one of the prophets who is up there. He says, how did you react to this? The prophet says to the rabbis, God left. He says, my children have defeated me. In a good way, right? He says that they've taken responsibility for their interpretations and how they argue with one another. But anyway, this is such early. He shows them a marvel. It rains, and then he says, "Thus you'll see how great and evil is that you chose a king." So thunders, right? Okay. They said, "Oh, please pray to God for us. We may not die, having added to all our sins by the evil of asking for it." He says, "Worry, you haven't done the evil I've been telling you all along. But as long as you serve God and not other gods, and as long as your king keeps in mind, things will be always ready to pray for you." He says, "but you have to do what you're supposed to do." Okay, so that's sort of like a concordat here. Okay, so the new king's in place. We're told tell about how sort of the Christians makes for the defense of the country. He takes some of his soldiers and he sets up at this place called Michmash, and then a little farther down in the hill country, someone named Jonathan has like a garrison to help him. Jonathan is his son, or one of his sons, and he's become a very major character today. Okay, but interesting, we're not told who he's at first. Okay, so we're told that Jonathan, Saul's son, attacks a Philistine garrison. Remember, the Philistines were the Ian Greeks settled the coast strip during the Bronze Age, and they were still hanging out there in their 5 cities. Okay, so they attack, or rather, Jonathan attacks them, and that is then going to lead to a war. Unlike the previous thing where we were attacked and we got a king to defend us, now we have kings and attacking someone else. King of, basically. Okay, so we're told that Saul sounds the alarm. Everyone come, mobilize again. He threatened this time. It says Saul has the garrison of the Philistines. He has made the Philistines angry, odious to them. Okay, so again, all together to defend or attack in this case. The Philistines gather their forces, but they have 30,000 chariots, again, divided by 10 maybe. They have all the hardware, right? So there's going to be a battle. Okay. There were so many Philistines gathered, most of the Israelite levy runs away. Well, again, look in Monty Python. There's too many of them. They go to hide in rocks and caves and across the Jordan. Wait till the enemy is gone, they said. Okay, so for Saul, unlike the first time when he had no problem getting people together, now we're told that his army is trembling in fear behind him, and his army deserted him. Now, that cause, why would that have been? I mean, he's shown that he's a competent leader. Why there and they had to fight a lot of people last time, but now I guess the Philistines like big bet, right? It's too much for us. So he said, and we're told that he's waiting for the prophet Samuel to show up so that Samuel could offer sacrifices on behalf of their victory. But we're told Samuel said, "Come 7 days." He didn't. That's interesting. This is going to be the start of a relationship between the former judge and king, which apparently has been created by the judge himself, right? He failed to show at the appointed time, and so Saul decides to do the sacrifice on his own in order to keep the army deserted. So Saul is definitely practically minded here, isn't he? And Samuel did follow through. Of course, once he does it, Samuel shows up, and he's not happy, right? We're told. Saul says, "Well, I was trying to hold things together." And Samuel says, "Well, you should have waited, right? You've acted foolishly. You kept the commandment of Yahweh your God." Well, now, it didn't actually say that God commanded this. It just says that Samuel is out there in 7 days to offer sacrifices. Now, we might assume that Samuel said, "God commands you to do this," but we're not told that, and it's actually interesting. Is Samuel really on board here, or is he also kind of defending his own failure to show up? In any case, he's using his authority to dress Saul down, right? You listened and wait for me just a few seconds longer, Yahweh would well establish your kingship forever, but now your kingship shall not endure. Okay, so we from sure out to totally successful king to it's not going to last. Of course, he doesn't say how long it's going to endure. Does that mean he gets to rule until he dies, but his son will succeed him, or does it mean tomorrow? What we've told, Yahweh sought a man after his own heart to appoint as ruler over his people because you did not observe what he commanded. Okay, so we have divine command ethics here. I told you that God told you to do this and you didn't do that. There you're now, we're not told whose other man is, and we won't know today at all because that's going to happen next week. But it's going to be an interesting story about Saul's son, Jonathan, which might lead the readers, first-time readers, to say, "Oh, maybe you're going to pick his son instead." Anyway, there's a tension there. So he sets out on his way. Not many soldiers with him, only 600 are left. Okay, so it's kind of in a bad state. Maybe it's part of the moral of the story. If you don't work with the prophet, you won't achieve your dramatic goals of having an army enough to defeat the enemy. But anyway, we go on here. So we get set up. So they can't opposite one another. Saul at Geba, the Philistines at Kamash, and there's big chasm between them, this sort of canyon. Okay, so that's the setup. We're also told that they had a military hardware problem. We're told not a single smith is to be found anywhere in Israel, for the Philistines had monopolized the iron industry. Remember, this is the Iron Age. Right? First millennium BC, bronze is out, iron's in. Iron is much easier to manufacture and makes better weapons, and the Philistines apparently had a market for this. But now they're using this to prevent the Israelites from getting necessary weapons they need. Only Saul and his son had a real sword, we're told. Okay, so again, they're disadvantaged. Okay, so in terms of the drama of the story, he came out really well. The first story, the second story, he's getting weaker. Is he going to pull through? Okay, well, fortunately, Jonathan, son, is going to take things into his own hands. He and his armor bearer say, "Let's go over the Philistine camp and do some damage. Just the two of us." Okay, we're told he did tell his father about it. Saul's sitting with his troops nearby, waiting to figure out what's going to happen. We're also told ahead of time that there was a priest with him, one of those ephod things. That's where he can divine what to do. So things think of the ephod as kind of strategy, right? Should we attack now? Should we move our troops this way or that way? Rather than waiting for some sort of organized response, Khan goes out and he's going to tackle this problem. Just the two of them. Okay, so they've crossed the rocky ravine, and he says, "Oh, let's go over to that host of uncircumcised." Okay, well, we know that circumcision was a mark of Israelite identity. Often, in the Bible, the Philistines are called the uncircumcised because apparently they didn't follow that custom. They're Greeks. They're from the Aegean, so they often call them. It's perhaps Yahweh will help us, because it is no more difficult for Yahweh to grant victory by means of food than it is by means of meat. Okay, maybe that's behind the Samuel kind of holding back. Maybe he's trying to teach Saul that he doesn't have to be thinking primarily in terms of numbers, although that's not what kings do, right? So the guy says, okay, let's do whatever we want. He says, okay, well, before we do this, let's wait for them to spot us. If the enemy says, oh, come up to us and fight us, then we'll go up. He says, that would be the sign that God's going to deliver them into hand. Okay, so he's framing what he's doing not in terms of just, bravado, but again, in terms of, I think it's going to win victory to the two of us. And so they climb up, and the Philistines say, look at them try and get up here. Come on, teach you a lesson. So they climb up the cliff, and he says, Yahweh's going to deliver it into our hands. And they do. So they get into the camp, and they slaughter the Philistines, and the Philistines, I guess they were taken by surprise, and the whole earth shook in an awesome shuddering. Apparently that's God helping to make them more awesome. Okay, so they disrupt the enemy. And meanwhile, here's Saul in this camp saying, what's going on down there? Why are the enemy running hither and thither? So his first action is, let's talk to the priests, get our little divination device and find out, should we attack? And this is another interesting character scene where he says, the ephod here, let's do this. And while he's kind of waiting for the priest to do his divination, he says the uproar in the camp kept increasing. And finally he says, oh, don't worry about it. So it's like he starts, we're going to find what the God wants us to attack. And says, don't worry about it, just attack. Right? So he's kind of impulsive, isn't he? Right? First, he started doing the sick thing. Let's consult the divine. But then he says, oh, we can't wait. Kind of like he didn't wait for Samuel. Of course, there's time there, but he can't quite make up his mind what to do. Okay, so they go, and they win. Again, Yahweh saves Israel that day. Okay, so they win the battle. But the bad guy is on the run. Saul says, let's keep chasing them and fighting them. And he says, we're not even going to stop to eat. So it says he laid a curse on them, saying, whoever takes food before evening, before I am able to avenge myself on my enemies, shall be cursed. Okay, so here the army is tired because they've been fighting all day successfully. He says, no one rests. That's actually in ancient literature, again, like not the Odyssey, but the Iliad. The Iliad, where you have the war with Troy. This whole idea of fight till Menelaus says fight until dusk. Don't even to eat or drink. And there's debate about whether that's a good strategy or not. But notice the way he frames this. I want to be able to avenge myself on my enemies. How's that different from the way Jonathan framed things, or the way he framed things last battle? In the last battles, no one's going to die because it was Yahweh who did this. But now I want to avenge myself on my enemies. He's kind of making it personal, isn't he? Is that a good thing for a leader? Often making it personal means that all of the positive and negative traits of the leader will be sucked into the decision-making process, right? So maybe it's a sign that things aren't so great with him. Anyway, he's being harsh with them. Meanwhile, poor Jonathan, who hadn't heard about this, finds something lying on the ground. Somebody said, ooh, this was good. We're told that his when he did this, his eyes brightened. That's actually an ancient expression in the ancient Near East for when you like glowing with joy, because he found some nice honey. Okay, so he's hungry. He's eating some honey, and the people saying, "Oh well, watch out! Your father curses anyone who does this." And then Jonathan replies, "My father brings trouble to the land." Okay, so he's being critical of him. Look how bright my eyes are because of this little taste of honey. I guess this is sort of an advertisement for, Manuka honey from New Zealand or wherever they're filming this, right? What is more, if the enemy had eaten freely of the enemy's plunder when they came across it today, surely the Philistines would have greater by now. Notice he's taking the opposite way. We should have rested, eaten up, so we had more energy. Okay, so he's taking the view here, and then we're told the Philistines are routed, and everyone's so hungry they start slaughtering animals and eating them with blood in it. They didn't have enough to drain the animals of blood. That's a bad thing in the Bible, right? Because covenant number 1 with all living creatures, don't eat blood. No vampires need to lie. And we learned in the book of Leviticus, all the cool rules and stuff, that the reason why you don't consume blood is the function of blood of slain animal is to cleanse the altar, to purify it from the effects of your wrongdoing. So he says, I've given it to you for that purpose, but not to eat. Right? Now, in the New Testament, Jesus will invert that idea. Actually, you need to have my blood in you. But he's playing with this same notion of blood is that which is agent. It's the detergent that cleanses, heals, that does that. So if you have that blood in you, you can't be an agent of atonement in the world. But that's a separate story. Anyway, they're doing that. But why are they doing this? Saul drove them to it. They're starving. They've got to eat. And but then Saul upbraids them for doing this. Says, "Well, let's at least do this properly. Get the giant ball from Raiders of the Lost Ark, and we will slaughter animals on it, sacrifice them, drain, and then eat them." Says, "You soldiers, broken faith. You must not sin against God by eating with blood in it." Okay, so he's doing the pious thing. But again, why are they doing this in the first place? Because he brought it about, right? So he's blaming them for the effects of his own decision making. Yeah.
Do you have anything written with all like how many days they were planning?
It doesn't. I think it's all like on one day. So it's like the evening of that day. I think. Still, it's like they've been fighting all day. They're starving. They have to eat. So he's certainly saying the right thing here from the perspective of the commandments, but he's not acknowledging that he created a situation that made it more likely they would do this. So he's blaming others for something did. Okay, so they set this up. He says, "Let's keep chasing them, plundering them, but first consult God." And so finally, Saul gives the priest enough time to divine, and says, "Shall I go down to the Philistine? Will you deliver them into the hand of Israel?" But he received no answer. That's usually a sign something wrong. Okay, so again, who's the source of wrongdoing? Well, he assumes it's someone else, right? So he's gonna, again, let's have our Urim and Tumim, find out who's responsible for this. Okay, so he says we're gonna cast lots to find who's responsible for God not talking to us. And then he says, "Stand beside me, my son. We're going to review everyone, see how they do." And of course, it turns out that son was the cause because he did the thing that Saul had cursed. Right? So it's really a strange situation. So curses are seen as effective instruments of aggression, right, or condemnation or judgment. So he's judged what has happened without knowing what has happened, right? So finds out that he had done this. He says, "What have you done?" Son says, "I only tasted a little honey. Am I to die for this?" And he says, "Yeah, this is what I said. I wouldn't want to lie, would I?" Right? Well, this all should remind us the bad old days with this. Because remember, one of the one of the things that kept the tribes continually creating more problems is they swear these bad oaths. And they, well, we can't break our oaths, so we're going to have to find some other solution to our problem, which ended up like murdering an entire village and, forcibly marrying their women to this tribe that was without wives. Also, we wouldn't break our oaths. So Saul is kind of replaying that ancient history. Fortunately, the army thinks better of it. They say, no, Jonathan can't die. He's the one who won this victory. Not a single hair of his head shall fall to the ground. Basically, we're not going to follow you anymore. So they rescue him. Saul gives up the pursuit, and they go home. Okay, so he has made some decisions. I mean, they got their victory, thanks to Jonathan, but he's made some decisions. In retrospect, at least, were probably not good, right? And he doesn't say I was to blame for this, right? It's always someone else who was the problem. Here, though, he reneges on his vow to slay his own son from the pressure of the soldiers. Goodness for them, right? But again, you put yourself in a situation where you're going to be pressured by people, and you make yourself vulnerable to public opinion. And so he's reacting to that. All right, so Jonathan is great, but Saul, he's got some issues to work through. Okay, we then come to a summary. So it's probably different sources, different traditions. This one is sort of the end of that tradition. Because he defended people against all the people round about. He was successful and fought bravely. He defeated the enemies. Okay, so end of that story. But we're not done with Saul yet, because we have a scene between Saul and Samuel, the prophet, right? So he says, it was I, Yahweh, sent to you as king for his people. Therefore, I have a message for you. You have a new mission, he says, chapter 50. He says, this is what God says. God says, I will punish what Amalek did to the Israelites when Amalek barred their way as they came up from Egypt. Okay, so we're going all the way back to Exodus here. There's a score to settle, in other words, God is saying, and I'm going to have you do it. We'll look at the story in a moment. So the mission for Saul is attack Amalek, kick him out, spare him, kill men, women, and children, and infants, oxen, sheep, camels, and donkeys. Well, this sounds a lot like that genocide stuff we saw in the book of Joshua, right? You exterminate the entire population and their animals. To remind us of the point of what's called harem, or devoting your enemies to a deity. The point is not that you're better than them, it's you are not allowed to profit from their demise. And that's an important point because Saul's going to violate that in this story. But let's go flashback. Have you ever saw the TV series Kung Fu with David Carradine? Okay, remember every episode was like half hour long. Every episode, like right in the middle of it, he has a flashback back to when he was a Shaolin in China, and the master says, "Grasshopper, you must do this," and that recollection reminds him of what he has to do in the present venture. Okay, so let's do our flashback to Amalek story. So we're in the book of Exodus. Israel is leaving Egypt, going to the Promised Land, and we're told Amalek, this tribe, came out and waged war against them. And Moses says to Joshua, we're going to go out and fight Amalek in battle. I will be on top of the hill, the staff in my hand. That's how it starts out. When we were looking at this story, this was a kind of a surprise because up until that point in the story, the Israelites had done no fighting. They didn't have to defend themselves. God, Moses says, just stay still and God will take care of it. So now he says, no, now we have to defend ourselves because we're being attacked. So he appoints a general, kind of Saul character, while Moses is stand up on top of the hill. And so on top of this hill, while the battle is going on, this is probably the mountain that goddesses associate with in this story. So it's almost like Moses is an avatar of the deity in his sort of storm god mode, with his hands up, sort of smiting the enemy. Anyway, they succeed, they defeat Amalek, and then God talks to Moses. He says, okay, we defeated Amalek, but I God will completely blot out the memory of this aggressor from under the heavens at some point in the future, right? And so they built an altar there, and it says, take up the banner of Yahweh. Yahweh has a war against Amalek throughout the ages. So here we have this notion of total war against this aggressor. And so, of course, he says that's going to be in the future. Well, who's going to defeat Amalek? Better call Saul. So Saul becomes sort of the sequel to that story back then. Okay, so back to the main story. Samuel said, go destroy the Amalekites. So Saul gets his army together, 200,000, maybe divide by 100. He goes up to the city of Amalek and gets ready to ambush it. He's not all that bad. He actually finds the civilians who are living by. He says, get out of the way so you don't get in the middle of this fight. So he's actually trying to save as many civilians. These are a nomadic people called the Kenites. And they helped Israel in the past. If you remember the famous story in the book of Judges was Deborah. Remember, Deborah was the judge, and they had an enemy attacking, and the enemy general runs to a tent to hide, and it happens to be a tent of a Kenite woman named Jael, who drives a peg through his head and wins the day. So thank you for helping us in the past. Please move away so you're not destroyed. Okay, then we're told they rout the Amalekites all throughout the land. And they capture the Amalekite king, whose name is Agag. He was Agag. They take him alive, but the rest of the people they destroyed. Okay, well, what's wrong with this picture? Well, they're supposed to destroy all of them, right? Why save the king? Well, we're going to find out here. Okay, so not only did they spare the enemy king, they also took all of their animals. They refused to destroy anything that was worth something, destroying only what was worthless and of no account. Well, that's the opposite of harem warfare. You're trying to benefit from the extermination of a people, and that can then be a justification for exterminating them, right? So Saul evidently didn't get that part of the memo. God calls up Samuel on the iPhone. I regret having text. Samuel, I regret having made Saul king, for he has turned from me and has not kept my command. Okay, so divine regret. That's something that's fairly rare in the Bible, but it's in a significant spot once before. Back in the primordial past, when you had the global history of humanity, right? You had God seeing, people were violent towards one another. They were violent towards the earth. They were doing all these terrible things with his good creation. And it says he regretted making human beings because of that. And it grieved him, grieving him, which is the same pain that a woman has when she gives birth. So here is God as sort of mother of all creation, grieving at and regretting that these creatures have turned to such evil. So he has the same experience thinking about Saul. We're told Samuel cried about it all night. Oh, I guess he did have feelings for Saul. Okay, so next morning he goes to find Saul to give him this message, but Saul was somewhere else. He had gone up to a mountain and set up a monument in his own honor. Ooh, okay, there's again, who achieved what is this, who is this all about? I guess it's about me. Okay, so we see Saul making things more about himself all the time, but he tells Samuel where to go to find him. Samuel goes and finds him. And Saul apparently doesn't realize that he's in trouble. He says, Yahweh bless you. I have kept the command of Yahweh. And then Samuel starts to ask questions. Well, where did you get all these sheep? And he says, oh, well, they were brought from Amalek. The people spared the best sheep and oxen for a good religious purpose, to sacrifice them to God, right? But the rest we destroyed, putting them under the ban. It's really interesting to think about, and this is really the key scene we want to look at. Does Saul know? Does he realize that he's made a mistake yet? Is he trying to cover this up already? Or is he just oblivious? This is the great question of, first of all, what kind of personality does he have? And secondly, are these mistakes that he makes, are they the effect of kingship? What does kingship do to a way a person thinks about themselves and about their job? Anyway, Anyway, so he says, "Oh, I did what we were supposed to." And Samuel says, "No, stop right there. God has a message for you." Okay, what did he say? Though little in your own eyes, are you not chief of the tribes of Israel? Yahweh anointed you king over Israel and sent you on a mission. Go and get rid of these sinful Amalekites. Why then have you disobeyed Yahweh? You've pounced on the spoil, doing what was evil in Yahweh's sight. Okay, so we know that he sort of did the wrong thing here. He is now being told this, and he says, no, I did obey God. I fulfilled the mission. I brought back Agag, the king, and carrying out the ban, I've destroyed everyone else. We're still not told why he spared the king. But the spoil, the army took sheep and oxen, the best of what had been banned, to sacrifice to Yahweh your God. Otherwise, I mean, he could have said Yahweh our God, but he says, no, it was your God. I did this for your God and for you, Samuel. And then Samuel has a very famous rebuttal to this, which is sort of cast in poetic verse. He says, does Yahweh delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obedience? Obedience is better than sacrifice. To listen is better than the fat of rams. A sin of divination is rebellion. Rebellion is a sin of divination, is what he means. The crime of idolatry is arrogance. So notice what he's doing. He's taking these sort of cultic terms, and he's equating them with attitudes like rebellion and arrogance. Arrogance is actually a pretty important indicator here. Maybe Saul is being arrogant. Because you rejected the word of God, God has rejected you. Okay, well, we heard that his kingship wouldn't endure last time, right? But this is a bit more cut and dried. He has rejected you, right? Punctually. Okay, finally, Saul comes around. He says, I have sinned. I have transgressed the command. But notice why he says this. I transgressed this because I feared the people and I obeyed them. Because I feared the people. Again, maybe he's lying, maybe he's covering, or maybe he's telling the truth. Moses' brother had this problem too once when he listened to the people because he didn't want to disappoint them. And that got him in trouble, right? He says, forgive me that I may worship God. But Samuel says, I will not return with you because you rejected the word. Okay, so he says it's the end of the line. There's no, again, kings get very little chance of second chances. Everyone else does, but not kings. Samuel turns to go. Saul seizes and tears on his garment. Hope it wasn't expensive. And he says, Yahweh has torn the kingdom of Israel from you this day and has given it to a neighbor of yours. Okay, so I guess it's not going to be Jonathan, who is better than you. The glory of Israel never deceives nor repents, nor is he a mortal who repents. So he's already made his decision. Don't tear my cloak. And they say, oh, I've sinned, but please honor me among the people. Return with me so I may worship your God. So he allowed him to do that. Okay, so it's this unfolding. This is a very famous passage, and the way it unfolds is sort of you're getting deeper and deeper into this guy's psyche. And often, even if he's just trying to throw out whatever he can to convince Samuel to do what he wants, again, he goes back to what does he want really? He wants honor from the people here, right? Just like he wanted vengeance against his enemies. He erected a monument to honor himself. He wants honor from the people. He wants the prophet to cooperate with this, even though he said, "Okay, I know I'm a goner." So still, he's holding on to this desire, right? Okay, then Agag, the Amalekite king, has to die. So Samuel has to execute him because Saul didn't. And again, he sort of, passes judgment as your sword made women childless, so your mother will be childless among women. So you'll be executed for executing all these people. And then he cut him to pieces. Okay, so end of King Agag. I focus on this story because there's going to be a third sort of sequel to this much later in the Bible called the Book of Esther. In the Book of Esther, a descendant of Agag is matched up with a descendant of Saul, sort of like Rocky 2, right? It's a rematch between Saul and Agag through their descendants. We'll get to see that at a later point. Anyway, then we're told Samuel departs. They part company with Saul. He never sees Saul again, but he grieves over him because Yahweh repented that he had made him king of Israel. Okay, so that is the content. Now we need to sort of put it all together. So again, it's a story about battles and things like that. Kind of interesting if you're interested in that sort of thing. But really, it's about character, right? It's about his character. And again, the way I frame it for us to think about is did he go wrong simply because he had some psychological flaws from the beginning? What role did his kingship play, perhaps, in pressuring him in the wrong directions? So, in other words, is it just that he was a bad guy from the beginning, uh, or and that the psych test didn't work when they chose him, or was it something about the nature of power that deforms him, as it were? And what would we point to in the story that would kind of illustrate one way or the other? Yeah.
There's something about Saul and Ghost.
Later on, yes. No, we're not done with Saul yet, actually. So they part ways. Later on in his life, just before he dies, he's going to raise the shade of Samuel from the grave and talk to him. And Samuel said, he keeps, recommending. Yeah, we'll see that probably next week, actually. Yeah. What's some other thoughts?
I kind of feel like maybe it's like kingship itself that starts to corrupt because at the beginning he wasn't excited to
Mm,
be chosen.
right.
He was hiding under the baggage.
Yes.
He wasn't like ready for the limelight. He wasn't like begging for it. He was trying to hide away from it. Like he didn't want it. And I also point back to how Yahweh talks about how like they don't need kings.
Right.
Like I'm your king. You don't need like people don't need to be kings. People don't need to be the king of Israel.
Human beings are not designed to be kings, is what he's saying.
Exactly.
You can have one if you want, but
But
it's not ideal.
yeah, he warned against it time and time again, and I think it's because like when you have that sort of authority, it like power corrupts.
That seems to be part of the message. I mean, it's not a surprising message because of those earlier scenes that we saw a couple weeks ago, where there's this warning. But if we can even sort of project further back, right, throughout the earlier books of the Bible, where we had a king, the Pharaoh, who had a problem, right? He was the obstacle to human flourishing, right? We had Abimelech in the book of Judges. We have Saul. We will have David later, who will also illustrate the problem of kingship, and it'll continue like that as we go through history. Yeah, the question is it just that power is the problem, or are human beings the problem and power just exacerbates it? I mean, you can go back even further to the second creation story where people have the knowledge of good and evil, but they don't always act on it, right? So very likely we should understand this as a human problem, but it's also not just, this is just human nature. No, it's human nature is also shaped by institutions, right? By structures, right? So in that sense, the Bible is very interesting because it has a complex understanding of human nature. Yeah, we all individually have a human nature, which with potential for good or bad, but the way power is structured matters. It often leads to more vulnerability, we should say. I mean, he wasn't always a bad guy. I mean, he made some good things too. And that's another important thing is, there are one-dimensional bad kings, but he's not one of them, right? He has good in him. He shows that initial promise. He's reluctant, but even when we think about something like these America's Got Talent, someone wins the contest and then they get a record deal, and people who grow up in that kind of fame, even though they didn't want it, they come to be shaped by it. We become more vulnerable to it, right? What are some other insights? Yeah.
Is there a little bit of a spirit of, so the Jewish people come to Samuel and say, we gotta have,
Right.
Samuel goes to Yahweh and,
Right.
expresses this on their behalf. And Yahweh is kind of like, well, if you give me 20 years to perfect one for you,
Right. This.
they gotta have it now. And he's like,
Ah.
the best I can come up with, it's like you want to go and buy an electric vehicle
Without knowing how to use it. Yeah.
is like, well, I don't have any of theirs right now, but I can give you a sweet deal on a 2025 Hyundai
Yes.
Sonata.
It's another good way of thinking about it that again, and that power is not a bad thing. People, or people in communities need power to effect the good, but people need to be formed properly, right? Individually and collectively. And so maybe maybe an important part of this story is the speed with which people want this, right? We want to shortcut the process of formation so we just get it. Yeah.
I was thinking with the animals, those guys were probably really hungry. They just wanted to eat something.
Oh yeah,
Try
they're
to
starving.
connive their way into getting a free dinner.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is like the plunder from the spoils of the battle. It's like we got it, we won. Let's eat.
Was there any precept that said they couldn't kill?
Oh, no, there's nothing against that. It's just that they're supposed to drain meat of blood before they eat it. So again, yeah.
Were they allowed to eat the animals from Amalek? They were supposed to kill them all, but they weren't supposed to profit from their two battles.
With Amalek, because remember, there's two battles, right? The one when they were eating the animals was the first one, and that was because they were starving. But with Amalek, they were supposed to destroy them all. They're not supposed to profit from them in any way, because this is about God's vendetta against them. It's not us about getting stuff. And even though Saul was able was tried to spin this, oh no, it's for a religious purpose.
Yeah, we never really did find out why he spared the king's life.
It's curious. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and that, like many aspects of these stories, the most interesting questions are not answered. Could it be, perhaps, that like that bad king at the beginning of the story, where he wanted to have this guy alive so he could publicly shame him? So, we're better than you. This is what the Romans did, that when they would defeat the enemies, they would lead the defeated enemy general or king or whatever in the triumph, and then they would display them to the people, and then they would execute them at the end. But the point was to humiliate them to show how great we were. Maybe that's what's behind this. I don't know. Yeah, but and it would be interesting then. You want to look at the history of interpretation of that passage. How have people read it? What assumptions did they make about it? Maybe that's one interpretation that was given. Okay, so coming next, we have Saul and David. We get to meet David, another kid. And yes, we'll get the David and Goliath story, but we'll see that there's another version of it that you probably don't know. And we'll see how the Saul thing continues to develop. And we'll see that David, although he is presented as the good guy and Saul as the bad guy through much of this, David himself is extremely vulnerable to violence. I mean, to inflicting, illegitimate violence on innocent people. And fortunately, he is prevented from doing it in this book. But we'll see that it doesn't last when he comes into power. So we'll see that again. The characters are complicated. They're neither just good nor just bad. But we see that they do go in both of these directions, shaped by their environment. Right. Okay. Thank you all for being here.